Hi, I'm Owen Binks, and you're listening to Weekly Dartscast 180.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Weekly Dartscast in association with Darts Corner. I'm Alex Moss, and alongside me for this, our World Grand Prix preview special, is the Darts statistician and still the Darts driver king at the time of recording, Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
Just trying to plan this weekend how I'm gonna keep that crown. I have a few running routes under consideration, but I'm not gonna let anyone steal away my glory. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing all right here, thank you. I'm probably going to try and get out for my weekly run at some point this weekend. But yeah, lots to catch up with you in terms of the Strava King race. But 2 episodes in a week, we are treating you guys this week. So let's get straight into it. The World Grand Prix is almost here, gets underway in Leicester on Monday night. Luke Humphries is the defending champion, but Luke Littler is the favourite with the title sponsored Ball Sports. But who do you think should be classed as the favourite to win it all?
Exactly who is the favorite to win it all. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I mentioned that Luke Littler was at the point that he had won a third of the events he had entered, and nobody else can say that. And if he's the player who is winning at the highest clip and often doing it with the best players in the world in the field, then you have to say then that makes him the player who's most likely to win it. And the player who's most likely to win it is the player who should be the favorite. At least if people are smart with their betting. That doesn't mean he's going to win. 2/3 of the events, he doesn't win. This is not like Michael Van Gerwen in 2015, 2016, when he was winning more than half the events he entered and nearly every event on television. At least nearly every event on a big stage, I should say, because he was winning most of the European tours as well. It's not that level of dominance. I don't know if we'll ever see anyone reach that level of dominance again because of the depth at the top of the game, as well as the fact that there are so many events that it's hard to always be at your best, even if you're cutting back the ones you play. But that still doesn't mean that there won't be a player, there can't be a player who is the most likely. And I think you have to say it's Luke Littler. At the beginning of the year, I said there were still question marks. His performance at the World Championships, other than his second round match against Andrew Gilding, had been absolutely phenomenal. And there was no question that he was going to achieve things in darts. The question I had when the year began was how would he process losing? How would he learn how to lose so that he could progress and win? And the answer was pretty much he just didn't lose. First Players' Championship event, he won. First Euro Tour event, he won. First World Series event, he won. But he experienced losing in the Premier League. He did not win in any of the first 8 nights, but it never seemed in doubt that he would eventually figure it out. And the rest of the way, the final 8 weeks and then the playoff night, he was the best player in the competition. He won half the nights, not including the playoff night. He won more than half the nights if you include playoff night at the O2 in London. And he won the Premier League. And since then, he's also added the World Series of Darts finals. He's won a pair of World Series events, and more recently made it to another Euro Tour final and won another Players' Championship event just a few weeks ago. He didn't win any of the 3 this past week, but he had 2 deep runs in Wigan, and he won his board on all 3 days. He's playing well. He's playing like someone who believes he can and believes he will win. But it is a difference between believing that and going out and doing it. And I'm not saying whether he's going to win. We have that question. Well, I will be saying whether I think he's going to win in maybe 15, 20 minutes time when we get to that question. I'm not saying it right now, but I think on paper, he is the player who is most likely. And therefore, the title sponsor are right to make him the favorite. And if people are betting him and keeping him that way, people are betting correctly. He is the player who's most likely, not by much. Luke Humphries is right there. Michael Van Gerwen might be there as well right now. And there's players you can't cross off like Gerwyn Price, who seems to be getting back to his best. Heck, even Peter Wright's been showing signs of a renaissance, as has Michael Smith. But the favorite, the player most likely to win, is Luke Littler. Therefore, that's the answer to this question.
Yeah, you touched on it. We had a similar question to this a few weeks ago. It was after the World Series finals when Luke Littler won that title, and we were discussing who's going to be the favourite for Ali Pally. And back then, I think we were split on our opinions. You had Littler, I had Humphreys, and I'm going to be the same here. I'm going to go with Luke Humphreys, but I don't think there's much in it at the moment. And I was looking when the draw was made for the World Grand Prix on Monday. Luke Littler was 11-4. Luke Humphreys 3-1. I've just had a look now. It's 10-3 Luke Littler and 7-2 Luke Humphreys. These two players, you'd say they are the unofficial number one and number two in the world right now. So it is right that they are leading the outrights for the World Grand Prix. But for me, I do still have Luke Humphreys as a slight favourite ahead of Luke Littler, and just because of what he's won over the last 12 months when it comes to the big ranking events. The World Grand Prix is where it really all started for Cool Hand this time last year. He become a major champion for the first time, and we've seen what he's gone on to achieve since then. Back then, you rewind 12 months ago, we'd heard the name Luke Littler. We'd seen him tear it up in the Modus Super Series and at a youth level, but we'd yet to see what he could do in the senior ranks of the PDC. Well, he's not done too bad, has he? I think 9 titles so far this year, including the Premier League, including the World Series finals that I mentioned. But it's a debut, the World Grand Prix, and there's not many debuts he's got left to tick off now. And you mentioned some of them, how well he's done in them as well. You talk about the Players' Championships, the Euro Tour, the World Series, the Premier League. There's not many where he stumbled at the first hurdle. The World Match Play is the one that springs to mind. And you'd probably put that on a similar keel to the World Grand Prix. But the double start format, it is a potential banana skin. How is he going to cope with that aspect of it? The having to hit a double to get off and obviously doubles to finish as well. We have seen players in the past come unstuck on debut at the World Grand Prix, and particularly with it, the format as well. And I'm sure we'll speak about it a few times, but that first to 2 sets, it's a brutal format for the first round, and especially the draw as well. I know Luke Humphreys has got his hands full with Stephen Bunting, but Luke Littler has as well with Rob Cross. So I think it's a very tough one here to say Humphreys or Littler. I think they are the clear two. Humphreys, defending champion, he's just won on the floor this week as well. The number one seed, the outright number one in the world. He's been hoovering up these ranking majors for the last 12 months. So for that reason, I'm going to make Luke Humphreys the favourite again.
Now, we mentioned Luke Humphreys. The World Grand Prix was his first major title win 12 months ago. Amazing to think that you go back 12 months in a week, he had no major titles. The World Grand Prix was, of course, also the tournament to kickstart Michael Van Geren's run to dominance in 2012. Who from the 32-player field this year do you think is best equipped to open their major account in Leicester next week?
Yeah, I put this question down on the spreadsheet, and then I was going through the 32 players, and there's not many to choose from, is there? Because if you include the World Cup as a major, then a quick head count, I think 20 of the 32 players lining up in Leicester next week have won a PDC major title before. I don't know if that's a record for a 32-player field, but I don't think there's been many more events with more major winners in it before. But if you don't count the World Cup, then it's still 19 players, and Damon Heta comes into the conversation. And with Damon Heta, we didn't see a big run from him in Wigan on the Pro Tour this week, but the last 2 of the 3 days he did lose in the last 16 with a 104 average. The Grand Prix, though, not been a happy hunting ground for him so far. 3 appearances, 3 2-1 defeats in the first round, and 2 of them lost in a last leg decider. But he's up against Mike De Decker first up, a player that made his debut in the Grand Prix last year, lost in the first round. So we are going to see one of those 2 get off the mark in the Grand Prix next week. So Damon Heta, he's a player I'll throw in there. 2 other names I'll mention, and both recent winners on the European Tour. One of them as recent as last weekend, Martin Schindler, 2 titles on the Euro Tour this year. Now he's made the quarterfinals in the World Grand Prix last year. I remember he beat Barney and Bunting in last set deciders to make that run. And 12 months on from that run, you'd think he's going back to Leicester this time round. Almost a different player, really. He's levelled up quite a bit, winning those 2 titles on the stage. And the other one I'll give a mention to, and he's always going to get a mention, isn't he? Because he's a player still looking for that first major title, and that is Dave Chisnell. 6 major final defeats in the PDC. 2 of them have been in the World Grand Prix. He's also had 2 semi-final runs in this event as well. So I think probably the same with every other player, really. It's getting past that first round. You can settle more. The format, it only goes up 1 set in the second round from first to two to first to three, but it can make such a difference that. So first to two, you go 1-0 down, you're already on the back foot and you're one set away from going out, whereas first to three, you've got a lot more breathing room. So I don't know if this will be his time, but Chizzy, when you see how well he's performed on the floor and the Euro Tour this year, you've got to throw his name into the hat. So for this question, I'm going to go Chizzy, Schindler and Heta. They're the three I'm looking at to maybe follow in the footsteps of Van Gerwen and Humphreys and win their first PDC major title next week.
Of course, you said you always have to include Chizzy, and that might be a sign that he's not going to do it, because if he does do it, then we can't always include him anymore. We only can keep including him until he finally does it. And, I really don't know what to say about Chizzy. He is such a talent. And, I'm not going to say anything more because we've talked about it so much. I've talked about it just last week or the week before. So, you know what? I'm not going to mention Chizzy. I'll also go three names. I'll duplicate one of the ones you said, Damon Heta, a player who, as you mentioned, has won the World Cup, but in singles play has not won a major in the PDC. But he also had never made a semifinal in the PDC before the UK Open earlier this year. It's not been as dominant of a year for him as some of his previous years. He's struggled at times on the European Tour, but on the other hand, he's played some really good matches and just not gotten the run of the green in them. Could this be his chance? He has not the worst first round tie against Mike De Decker. Of course, De Decker just won recently, but it's a good match to get out of the way before you have to play a former world champion, either Michael Smith or Gary Anderson. So I think the draw, especially in this event with the double-in format, could be favorable to him, but we'll see how it goes. If he were on last year's form going in, I would say that this might be his chance, but I'm still not going to look past him. He is a top 10 player. He's a player who could be a top 5 player if he gets a big run in one of these majors. That's how tight it is near the top. But I'll mention two players you didn't mention. I was considering Schindler as well, but I'll go Jan van Veen. And he still hasn't won a title of any sort in the, at least senior title, in the PDC, but he did just make his first Euro Tour final a couple weeks ago. And after falling a bit off his game for a bit of this year, he seems now to be getting back to the emerging star that he was earlier in the year. I think he has a tough draw against Ross Smith, but it depends what Ross Smith does with the doubles. He's the best scorer in the world, but he can be shaky on the doubles. And this event, you need to get away. I think it's a good draw for Jan van Veen. And hey, maybe this will be it. And I'll mention one more player. It's not Dave Chisnell, but it's his first round opponent, Cameron Menzies. Menzies is going to win a title as well at some point, and maybe it'll just come in a major. He's moving in the right direction. He's become such a talented player. He made 5 consecutive quarterfinals or better in Players' Championship events a few weeks ago. He's won his board in 7 consecutive events. He's won his board a total of 10 times this year. He is a emerging star. Maybe this will be it. And I lied. I'll mention just one more. I have to mention it. Ryan Searle. But we talked about him last week. Everyone knows why. He's a future major champion. The question is just where's his head after giving away a Euro Tour title?
Well, let's get to our first guest on the show, a player that you've just mentioned, the emerging star himself, one of the debutants in the World Grand Prix next week. Here's our chat with Cameron Menzies. I'm pleased to say we're joined by one of the debutants in the World Grand Prix next week, Cameron Menzies. Thanks for the time again, Cameron. How are you doing?
Yes, mate. Not bad, mate. Not bad yourself.
Doing well, thank you. And we're talking just a few days before you make your debut in what is one of the biggest darts events on the calendar, the World Grand Prix. How are you feeling as we edge closer to that first time on stage in Leicester next week?
Yeah, I'm okay at the moment. I'm usually okay a couple of days before it. I just had to phone up today and get the day off. I can't get the day off, so we're doing half for a play, so I'll be fine till about 2:30 and then the nerves will kick in.
And you and Dave Chisnall are going to be up first on the second day of action on Tuesday, a player that you know well. What are your thoughts on facing Chizzy first up?
Arguably, I think he's been the best player on the Pro Tour this year. I think, could be wrong, but I think he's top of that. So, no matter who I was going to get anyway, I was going to play one of the all good players anyway. So, nothing changing that aspect. So, yeah, hopefully it's the same as anything: double start, double finish. You've got to get away in the first 3 darts. If you don't, I think you're going to have a very good chance of losing the leg. So, basically, being clinical. At the start of the leg and the bottom of the leg, which is not usually my strong point, but I've got 3 or 4 days to try and get the hours in and the doubles, and hopefully they go well.
Yeah, you mentioned the format for the World Grand Prix, very unique in the PDC with it being double start. Have you played much double start events at a local level before?
I did years ago when I was younger, and I hated it because I always get beat first round. I've not played the one since because I was just fed up. I got a 3-1 double start, double finish. I was playing guys who usually you beat them quite comfortably, but a different kind of setup for them. And then they used to smash me, so I ended up just getting fed up and not playing a bit. So it's going to be fun. But as I said, I've got 3-4 days to try and practice it and play it, and hopefully get myself up to speed.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what is like the practice regime? Obviously you've been playing a few days in Wigan this week on the Pro Tour, which is the normal format, but now this is the next event. Do you put any extra hours in the practice board on the doubles?
Yes, I think I'll do the doubles anyway. I usually try and sharpen them up because you can't go wrong with that, but I feel like I'm going to, sometimes I play like games, some 5-1 sets and whatnot. I'm going to try and do it double start just to try and get into the habit of what's coming up on Tuesday, because I feel like at one point I'll let it forget and go straight for triple 20, so I need to try and get myself prepped properly or as best I can and see what happens.
Well, this is the first time that we've had you on the show for a few years, so we're just going to look back on the last few years for you, and going back to the last time we had you on, actually, November 2021. Back then you just qualified for your second Lakeside after winning the Welsh Open, but by the time you got to Lakeside, a lot of change for you. The main thing being you now had a PDC tour card. Yeah. So take us back to that week at Q School, coming away with a tour card for the first time.
Yeah, I think that was one of the worst weeks I had, like performances wise. Like I didn't no great averages, but I'd done well the first day, and that was in the end up enough to get through. Lost in the last game, but sometimes that is enough. Sometimes it's not. It's just your luck. It's a horrible place, Q School. It's very hard, and obviously, in my opinion, not always the best players get through. So sometimes you're lucky to draw and stuff. But that's why it's so good to watch. Rather watch it than play it, because you'll get people you don't know. You get some random players getting through, and I think it's quite good in a lot of calendars for people because it's different and it's good to watch. But yeah, hopefully I'll not be at Q School for plenty of years anyway, because I don't miss that side of it.
No, you're definitely going the right way about avoiding it for a little while longer. And that Q School campaign, you mentioned it, you had such a great first day getting to the final on that second stage. The first day, the next couple of days you didn't add any points, but you got that extra point on the final day. So what was that moment like when you got the nod to say that you had done enough?
I was buzzing because obviously the pressure after the first day was just like a free hit and it went well. Then I lost the final, and then after that I couldn't pick up a point, so it was starting to get pressure on me. And obviously you had people at the start saying, "Oh, that may be enough," or "Oh, it seems enough." And then it would have been enough. I think it would have been enough anyway. But that extra point, just when I won that game, that extra point, I think I didn't get as soon as I won that game, I didn't get the whole "that's you safe." It was like, you're a very, very good place now, and I wasn't told after I got beat off, because I remember who beat me. It was Darren Berries who beat me, and after he beat me, I was just like waiting for that green bar kind of thing. And then it was straight after I lost, I got told, like, the way the obviously results went, I should get your tour card. So it was good because I've been so close so many times, and to finally go over the line, which is usually the hardest part, because I did say after that, and folk have said now, is like the best bit now what to do is just keep my tour card every year, because I know how hard it is to get it.
Definitely, and one of the highlights from that first year on the tour has got to be making your debut at Ali Pali, getting a win on debut as well. What did that mean to you?
Yeah, well, obviously when I was younger, Lakeside was always the one for me, just because I think I grew up with that era and stuff. But the older I've got, the way darts has transformed, the PDC is obviously the way forward. So yeah, to go to Ali Pali and win, I don't think I've played anywhere near my standard at Ali Pali yet, but averages are good, but I'm still about to win. So to win on debut was good. Hopefully this year I can go by the second round kind of thing. I'll hopefully win the first game again, whatever it is, and hopefully get a wee run going, because if you look at the Littler story, obviously he's different, but a good run at the Worlds can change your career.
You were back at Ali Pali again last year and you made the headlines with your social media, plumbing at 11, darts at 8. You were working before playing on that opening night of the World Championship. Had you run out of holiday so you couldn't book that day off? What happened there?
Yeah, it's just because we're so busy at the moment. I get the time off as long as I give them like 3-4 weeks in advance. So it's pretty much exactly the same as this week. Because the draw's only done last week, I need to work half a shift on Tuesday before I drive to Leicester. It's just because we're so busy with the plumbing side of it kind of thing. We only have like 4 or 5 plumbers because we work with the housing at the council and stuff. We're really busy and I'm basically booked out for like 3-4 weeks. So if I do it next week and try and cancel the jobs, there's obviously tenants in the houses waiting for a plumber, and if I cancel, there's obviously the job might not get done and it's not good for the council. So it's a bit awkward that side of it, but as long as I usually give them 2-3, I guess usually 3-4 weeks they want notice, they'll give any time off because that's how they plan it. But if I give them like a 4 or 5 days notice, it's a bit awkward because obviously they've got the tenants all at home waiting for a plumber and they see me on the TV.
So I'm guessing we're going to see another post on social media next Tuesday.
It depends the jobs I've got. If I don't get them to them, when there was a blocked toilet or a dodgy bathroom, I don't think I'll put that up. Depends the jobs.
Well, let's stick with your darts then, because you kept your tour card at the end of the 2 years. You were well inside the top 64 coming into this year, but fair to say this year we've seen you make a lot more strides. Via Darts Oracle, you averaged 92 for 2022, 93.5 for 2023, but so far this year around 96. So what for you's clicked this year?
I don't know. It was the end of last year before the Worlds, maybe like November time. Some of the darts I was throwing in the house was even surprising me because one night, like averaging over 6-7 sets. About my first nine was 120, my second was like 110. Like my my average was like 110 and something, and it was happening not once a blue moon. It was happening like once a week, and then it was happening twice a week, and then I just hoping to click it, and I feel like I'm getting used to the longer days and stuff. Apart from this week, I don't know, it's not been the greatest, but the longer to getting used to how the days are, because they are long days kind of thing. If you do well on the Pro Tour, you're in there about 10 o'clock in the morning till 6, 7 at night kind of thing. You get home, get a bite to eat, and you're back in bed, and then you're back out the next day. It's tiring because it's not physical, it's more mentally being concentrating and stuff. And usually you've seen it with me as I have 2 good games and then I'll falter because I just need to run out of steam. So I'm trying to, not by the size of me, but I have been joining the gym to try and get my fitness up a wee bit, because it is the mental side. It's crazy just trying to be so focused all the time.
Good to hear. And only recently we've seen you go on a lot of great runs on the floor. You talk about them long days. You've had plenty of them. You had a quarter-final, semi-final, final, quarter-final in a row, and you got to your first Players' Championship final, just edged out by Chris Dobie in the end, despite averaging a ton. But how did you reflect on that day and also that run that you had there?
Yeah, I just had that wee. I think it's a similar kind of run that Stephen Burton's having at the moment.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes you're just in that little purple patch where you're playing well and you're finding that right score at the right time and you're getting the wins. It's also all good at the time, but toss of the coin, it can go the other way and you can lose first round playing well. So it's good to get the runs together, because I've been on the other side when you're playing well and you can't seem to get a win. But obviously I do think I'm playing better darts at the moment, because even up like counties sometimes or Super League, it's usually always in the 30s or above, and I remember the days where I'd bite the head off for a 30 average. Now quite regular.
I was looking so far this season, you've beaten 12 of the top 16, 20 of the current top 32, a lot of big scalps, including that win against Michael Van Gogh with the 108 average, but you've also beaten some other big names, Barney, Peter Wright on the Euro Tour. How much confidence have you taken from your performances so far this year?
It's good to finally get the results against them and doing it on a bigger stage. That's the hardest part, is putting on the floor is different from the stage with that atmosphere, and sometimes I locals notice it. I go up and enjoy it too much and I end up getting involved with the crowd, so sometimes I just get up there and I'm just trying to be a bit more professional and just kind of focus on the game, just because I was just honoured to be up there. Now I'm getting used to it, I believe. I'm being more focused, and hopefully that's does me in good stead.
Definitely. And I saw a recent interview you did where you mentioned your partner Fallon Sherrick, and you said without her you wouldn't be where you are today. So how much of a support has Fallon been in your career?
Yeah, massively. Most of the Pro Tours she drives and stuff, so she helps me like with work and stuff, because if I didn't have to drive, we drive usually in the morning of the Pro Tours and stuff, so that side is massive. Because if not, I would have to take an extra day off work or whatever it is, or stay an extra night in a hotel away from home and stuff. So a lot of times she drives up and then drives home on the last day kind of thing, so I get more time at home, also with the practicing and stuff. So yeah, she's getting loads next week, so I think in a couple of hours we're going to have a wee practice, because she needs a practice as well for next week. So the twos are got a lot of darts next week, so that'll be us for the weekend.
Yeah, there's plenty coming up for both of you, and Fallon, she's in a good position to qualify for Ali Pali again, so we've got to ask you the obvious question: when are you two going to draw each other at the Worlds?
Oh, mate, don't. That would be my biggest fear. It could happen, and I don't even want to imagine it, because that'll be horrendous. Because whoever loses it's like a lose-lose situation. No matter what happens, it's I've a few arguments. That ball's getting 2 kilometres to what, so she can't practice.
And I think if you were to win that game, you'd have to get another lift home as well, probably.
I need to go stay in a hotel for a few weeks.
And we've got to ask as well a question that everyone wants to know the answer to. When is the blonde hair coming back as well?
The blonde hair? God, that was many moons ago. I'm getting too old, mate. Mind you, I'm getting grey, so I might have to dye it.
And on Twitter as well, we often see you talk about your beloved Rangers, still early in the season, but what are your hopes for them?
Well, if you looked at the result last night, mate, they're not pretty good. Yeah, I watched the game last night. It's not been fun, but it's a big change at Rangers at the moment. I think we're playing over what we had, and they were basically skint. So we're just trying to get rid of some players on high wages, and unfortunately, some of the players were better players, and put in some young players and stuff. But yeah, looks like Celtic's going to win the league comfortable at the moment. Hopefully something changes, but it's looking one-sided at the moment, because we're struggling to win and Celtic are dominating the league. Every time they win, they're winning comfortable, and we are scraping by 1-0 games at home, and we should be winning them quite comfortable. But yeah, it's just the joys of being a football fan.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, we've got a few listener questions before we let you go. The first one comes from Big G180. He says, when does Cammy think he's going to go full-time pro? He's got the game.
I'd be honest with you, I think could be soon, just because working and darting is getting to me a wee little bit, because I've been on the road for 3 weeks basically, and the first day I'm back home, I'm back to work. So I've asked the work to go part-time down to 3 days a week, and I've waited 3 months for an answer. They've not really got back to me about it. They have been massive with me for my darts, giving me all the time off, and I'll obviously be so grateful for that. But it's getting to the point, it is a struggle, because I am sometimes working, then darts and working and darts. I've not even had a holiday this year. I got to Benidorm for like 3 days. I'm going again in 2 weeks for Benidorm for 3 days. That's the closest I get to a holiday, because it has been relentless, because usually when I do have any time, I try and go home and see my daughter. So it's been hard, and the way this year has went, it's more because I enjoy my job. That's the issue. If the job wasn't one you like, then I think the tails would have been put by a long time ago. But yeah, it's so close. I feel it's more because I'm feared to take that jump and then fail. But I've got a good crew behind me with the plumbing. I'm sure I can come back to if that's fail. So yeah, I think it could be pretty soon, because I've had a meeting with the work and stuff, and if I don't go part-time, I think that would be finished soon, because it is a bit much.
No, it all makes sense. And well, I've got to say, I've been to Benidorm once before. I think 3 days is probably the right amount of time to be going there.
Yeah, no, but I don't just go for the party side. I like to go at the quiet area. I'm getting too old for that party time now. The main drag of Benidorm's too much for me. I used to when I was younger. Nowadays I like to go in quiet bits and stuff. Plus, being ginger, I burn quite easy, so I sit in the shade most of the time.
And Big G's got another question. It's relating to obviously your career in darts. He says, do you feel you can crack the exhibition circuit and gain more sponsors to help you go full time, or is it just something he doesn't want to do at the moment?
That side, it's up to the managers. So I have a few exhibitions at the end of the year. Hopefully, at the moment, I only have one sponsor, which is Unicorn. But that side of it's up to the managers. They deal with all that stuff. That's what they do. So yes, I'm hoping in the future to do more exhibitions. But I say that it goes to the managers and stuff who they deal with all that. But if I do go full time with the darts, then obviously I would need a lot more exhibitions for the incoming stuff, just in case the darts don't go well.
Definitely, and the last one comes from Harry Mears. Obviously, we've got the World Grand Prix just around the corner. He says, what does Cammy need to do for him to transition his performances on the Pro Tour into a major tournament?
Go back to COVID days and play in the quiet room. I don't know. I'm hoping getting to the experience of playing at that level. I think I've showed a little glimpses on the Euro Tour of those performances, but it is different, and I've seen it over the years. Guys have maybe not done that jump from Pro Tour to the big stage, and hopefully that comes with experience for me. So technically on the big stage I've only played maybe 4 or 5 times, so hopefully a bit more experience and start being more consistent on the stage, and hopefully make more majors and just make a career out of it.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing how you get on next week, Cameron. It's always great to get you on the show. Thanks for the time, and wish you all the best, not just for the World Grand Prix next week, but what else is to come in 2024 as well.
Yes, mate, not a problem. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks again to Cameron for joining us, and we're going to look ahead to the World Grand Prix in a moment, pick out our first round ties we're most looking forward to, make our predictions for who we think is going to win the title as well. But before we do, let's head over to our sponsors, Quiff and Jack Milner, who's going to talk us through some of the best odds and also give us a price for our weekly Dartscast parlay for the first round next week. I'm pleased to say we're joined by Jack Milner from Quiff again to talk us through the odds ahead of the World Grand Prix. Jack, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, pal. How's yourself?
Yeah, doing well, thank you. And as always with these, we'll start off with our parlay. If you're new to the show, any of our new listeners, when it comes round to the TV events, we'll look ahead to the first round with our sponsors Quiff and Jack's help, and I'll pick out 2 predicted winners for the first round. My co-host Burton will do the same, and Jack will do the same. And at the moment, Jack, you're leading the way. You've got the bragging rights. You've had 4 right, 2 wrong, and me and Burton both equally as bad as each other, 3 right and 3 wrong. But we'll see how we get on with the World Grand Prix next week, and it is a very short race, first to 2 sets, obviously the double start as well, so it's going to be difficult picking some winners here. But my 2 picks, I've gone with Martin Schindler and Ricardo Pietreczko, the German double. Burton, he's gone with Cameron Menzies and Chris Dobie. And Jack, do you want to talk us through your picks and how that's looking for a 6-fold parlay overall?
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of go this. You two always go with a bit more, dare I say, adventurous, a bit bigger prizes. I'm a bit more guarded, so I do think Luke Humphries will probably win this week. Next week, sorry. I think he's playing Stephen Bunting, right, in the first round. He's a little bit skinny. I'm going to go on the similar price, but I think Michael van Gerwen is going to be very, very difficult to not get through to the second round. I think he's playing Daryl Gurney. Did I put him up 4-11? Yeah, I think that's about a fair price. Another one, I won't say father and son, but I always used to look up when it was Lewis Taylor, because there's always that mentor type match, and it's going to be Gary Anderson to beat Michael Smith. Michael, he's looked a bit better the last few weeks. I think he went out with the first round yesterday at the time of recording, Players Championship 24, whereas Gary was still in red hot form. I think he averaged 112 in one of his games this afternoon. He's currently playing in the quarterfinals. We were saying Gary's not good for these long events where he's got to be in an isolated place. I'm luckily or unluckily in my former role looking after Unibets as darts, I had 8-9 days in the City West in the old venue, and it was brutal. Like it's a place. Look, it's half an hour outside of Dublin. So the players were all basically, if they wanted a night out, let's be honest, they'd all have to make sure there was 4, 5, 6 of them in a minicab to share the taxi, because you're looking at 100 quid both ways. So some of the young boys, I think they may get frustrated. Luckily, they've moved to Leicester this time, which I think will be a really positive move. But Gary Anderson, I do think he's going back to the peak Ando, providing, Gary's always struggled with his doubles, a bit like my good friend Dave Chisnell. His scoring's never been a problem, providing they go in, as they have been doing in these recent Players Championship events. I think Gary Anderson around the 4-6 mark is a good price against Michael Smith.
And putting all those 6 games together, how's that looking for our listeners if they want to back all the picks that we're doing?
Just confirm for me again, we've got the 2 Germans, is that right?
Yeah, we've got Schindler and Pietreczko, we've got Menzies and Dobie, and then we've got your 2 picks, Anderson and Van Gerwen.
Again, so if we go through Martin Schindler, he's odds on against Brendan Dolan. we want to, let's have a look. 1, 2, 3. Let's put it in the big machine. See if we get a price. We get 20. It works out around 28-1 with Quiff for the 6-fold. Obviously, you've got the chance that might be supercharged as well. But I think 28-1. That's not a it's not a bad luck. I might have to throw a few quid on myself. Obviously, with one of our competitors. Obviously, please gamble responsibly, 18 plus. But on the first day, I think Brendan Dolan kicks it off. Providing the history maker can get swept aside, you've got Cameron Menzies. Jeez, he's been missing a lot of doubles today. God love him. He's through to the quarterfinals against Andrew Gelding here. But I think it's one of those where you could easily start ticking them off one by one, and at 28-1, hopefully get a supercharge on that. It could be even bigger. Fingers crossed.
Well, good luck to any of our listeners giving it a go. And we should also mention some of the outrights, anything that's taken your fancy. Obviously, Luke Humphries, he is the defending champion. This was the first major title he won 12 months ago, and he's gone on to win an awful lot more. But we've also got Michael Van Gerwen in there as well. Luke Littler making his debut. I'm sure he's going to be high up on the betting. But what's taking your fancy from what you're looking at the moment?
I mean, Luke Littler is the pre-event favourite. I think he's a little bit skinny. I'm not going to lie to you. Luke Littler is a 3.45 favourite. And what's your take on Littler in terms of, I won't say hype, because he's obviously a very good player. Again, do our weekly blog with Dave Shisley. You can find that at community.quiff.com. And he said, Shisley will always say, you don't need me to tell you he's got to throw darts. But he's not yet the poster boy. The PDC are trying to make him the poster. In my head, he's not the one to beat it every time. Luke Humphries still is. But Luke Littler is priced like he's the most likely winner. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I'd have Luke Humphries as the favourite. He is the world number one. As I say, he's won an awful lot over the last 12 months, but you've got to hand it to Luke Littler as well, what he's managed to achieve since that run to the World Final. He's won the Premier League, he's won the World Series finals just a few weeks ago, so he's got, I think, 9 titles this year. But yeah, for me, he's making his debut in this event, the double start format. I don't know how many times he's played double start, whether that's at a local league level, but this is the only time we see this format in the PDC, and it can be a real tricky one to get hold of. We've seen it in the past before, players come unstuck in the first round, not get to grips with it. So I think this first round is going to be where we probably answer a lot of questions with regards to Luke Littler and the World Grand Prix, and what a game he's got in the first round as well. Rob Cross in that first round, not the easiest of tasks for a debut.
Yeah, and I mean, Rob Cross, he's no mug. You forget Rob Cross is still, I think, is Rob 3 in the world, 4 in the world? You could argue he's had a quiet year by his standards, right? But he got to the semi-finals of the World, quarters of the UK Open, the match play, the World Series. I think he's a bit of a forgotten man. I think the Littler hype, and obviously Van Gerwen's kind of a bit up and down, should we say. But Luke Humphries, for me, is still very much underrated as the world number one, the world champion, as the man to beat the sport. And you throw into the fact, because Rob Cross isn't probably that sexy. Rob Cross is 15.8 with ourselves at Quiff to win the World Grand Prix. If he gets past Littler in the first round, he's also probably half, if not short further. I'd rather back him rather than say Gezi at 8.4 or Michael Smith 11.4. Gary around the 9 to 10 to 1 mark. I think that's probably the value for me. Just if he can acclimatise, right, and the fact he's in Leicester, he can probably go, the way the format is this week, he can probably go and play, I think, on the Monday and then go home for a couple of days. He doesn't have to be there for a week, right? He can probably drive home for a day. It's only a few hours drive to Somerset. Gary Anderson for me, and I'm a bit biased, right? I've been a Gary fanboy since following the Dream Boy back on back at the leg side. But Gary Anderson 10 to 1 with Quiff. That would be the money for me.
Well, there we go. Well, the World Grand Prix is always one of the most exciting events on the calendar. Probably not the easiest one if you're having a flutter at home, but if you are having a flutter, do it with Quiff. Head on over to the Quiff website, download the Quiff app, and as you touched on as well, you've got to be 18 plus. T's and C's apply. Please gamble responsibly. BeGambleAware.org for more information on that. And Jack, good luck with your picks on the parlay. Let's see if you can keep your lead at the top over me and Burton, and we'll be having you back on very soon because we have got the European Championship coming up at the end of the month.
European Championship, I handed the trophy to James Wade. They're back in 2018, and I won't give the full expletives, but post for the trophy afterwards. where he beats Whitlock in the final, and he just looks at me and goes, "Are you going to give me the effing trophy or not?" And Chips, we'll propose to afterwards. But yeah, it's a bit busy time. European Championships in Dortmund, great venue, right next to the football ground. More Euro Tour action. I think the lads are in Czech Republic, aren't they? And then you've got the Grand Slam, the Lakeside end of the world. So very busy few months for darts fans.
Definitely, lots to look forward to, Jack. Always great to get you on. Thanks for giving us some of your time, and we'll speak to you again in a few weeks ahead of the European Championship.
Pleasure. Cheers, lads. Be lucky.
Thanks again to Jack for joining us. So let's get into our preview of the World Grand Prix and kicking things off with the first round. A lot of tasty looking ties, but which ones are you most looking forward to watching?
Well, you'll be happy to know that I only have 5 of the 16 ties on my list. I don't know if I'll mention all 5 because I'm sure you have a lot of the same ones I do. And I mentioned some of them in the last question. I mentioned that Dave Chisnell will play Cameron Menzies. I'm really high on Menzies right now, but Chizzy's one of the best players in the world. It is a tough first round tie, no matter how it goes. And obviously, being that Menzies is my upset pick for the 2 players I have on our ACA for this event, I think Menzies will win it, but I'm prepared to be wrong. And especially considering Chizzy, even though he's another one of those players who we think more of his scoring and less about his doubles. He has a great record here at the World Grand Prix. That is a tough first round tie. But I'll mention 2 more. There's 2 that stand out, and I know you're going to be talking about one of them. I'll leave that one to you. You probably are talking about this other one as well, but I'm going to say it. Rob Cross against Luke Littler. I mean, how can you not be looking forward to that tie? The appreciation minute against the teenage sensation. And I'll throw out just one more. And it's at the very top of the draw. The world number 1, Luke Humphreys, going against Stephen Bunting. A rematch of the most recent event in PDC darts. Players Championship 26. They made it to the final. Humphreys, a beautiful last leg to steal the victory, 8 legs to 7. Bunting made it to the final of all 3 events this past week. So he's obviously in some form. That's a match where the winner of this could go on and win the entire thing. But only one of them will even make it to the second round.
Yeah, some great picks there. And we've said it before with the World Grand Prix, but it's 8 seeds instead of the 16 that we have at the World Match Play. And it does throw up that prospect of some more tasty looking ties right from the get-go. You do have that possibility of 2 top 16 players facing each other in the first round, whereas in events like the Match Play, you wait until the second round. The World Championship, you wouldn't get that until the 4th round. So we've got 2 of them this year. You mentioned one of them, Luke Humphreys against Stephen Bunting. You've also got Gerwyn Price against Danny Noppert, which are both great games to look forward to. But there's a lot of other ties in here which don't involve top 16 players against each other. And I think that just goes to show the strength and the depth that we've got in the game right now. You look at a tie like Michael Smith against Gary Anderson. It's a repeat of the World Match Play first round. They've drawn each other again here in the opening round of the World Grand Prix. That could be a question for the rest of our darts statisticians out there. How many times have the same 2 players drawn each other in the first round of the Match Play and the Grand Prix in the same year? Has it happened before? Rob Cross against Luke Littler, you mentioned it, and it's a similar one to Smith and Anderson, really. You've got Littler and Anderson both ranked in the 20s, but they're not the 20th and 24th best players in the world, are they? They're much higher than that. And Littler, either 1 or 2, and Anderson, if he can translate some of the ridiculous darts he's been producing on the floor to the stage over the next few months, 1, he could be adding another major title to his CV, and 2, there's a strong argument that he is perhaps the 3rd best player in the world right now, the one right behind the 2 Lukes. So my 3 standout ties, I'm going to go with Smith and Anderson, Cross and Littler for obvious reasons, but I'm also going to throw in one that you didn't mention there, and it is Michael van Gerwen against Dale Gurney, a clash of 2 former World Grand Prix champions. Again, could be a question for the statos out there. Has that ever happened in the World Grand Prix before, 2 former champions facing each other in the first round? But for Gurney, I feel like he's one to watch here. He's had a couple of quarterfinals, a semi-final on the Euro Tour. He had the quarterfinals at the World Series finals, a few semi-finals on the floor recently. So I think he's someone that could cause an upset here. And Michael van Gerwen, the last time we saw him, he had that great run to the title on the European Tour, but we've not seen him play in any events since then. So if he is slow out of the blocks, and as I say, we've not seen him in action for a few weeks, that could be a very interesting first round game to watch.
Well, it is prediction time. Who will be crowned the 2024 World Grand Prix champion next Sunday night?
Oh yeah, it's our favourite part of the show, isn't it? Getting our predictions in for who wins the title. And thankfully, I've forgotten all about my World Match Play predictions, because I think I did try to predict the semi-final lineup, but I can't remember who I had in there, but I doubt there were many correct picks. But I'm going to have another go here with the World Grand Prix next week, and starting from the top to the bottom of the draw. And at the top, I'm going to go with the safe pick. I'm going to go with Luke Humphries to make it through to the semi-finals. When you look at his record in these ranking majors, he's not lost in the first round for 2 years, the World Grand Prix 2022. And since then, he's had so much success, and he's actually made the quarterfinals minimum in these ranking major events going back to the World Match Play last year. So that's 8 consecutive ranking majors where he's made the last 8, and he's won 4 of the last 5. The outlier in the group, he lost in the final with the UK Open this year to Dimitri van den Berg, and he had match starts, so he could have been 5 from 5 going into this event. But that record, yeah, it's going to come to an end at some point, you'd imagine. Maybe the World Grand Prix is the place for that, with it being a short race. As I said, first to 2 sets in the first round, and against Stephen Bunting, who you said has just made 3 finals in 3 days on the floor. So it's a very tough one. But I'm going to go with Luke Humphries. There is the prospect of a Humphries-Littler semi-final here, but I'm going to be different. I'm going to say Martin Schindler makes it through that section to make his first ranking major semi-final, and he's going to go one better than that. He's going to beat Luke Humphries to make his first major final. Bottom half of the draw, the third quarter, it's looking pretty stacked, isn't it? Big names in there. I think you've got 4 former world champions in there. Poor Mike De Decker, it's like he's been thrown to the lions in that quarter. It's a hard quarter of the draw to call there, but I'm going to go with Gary Anderson. I think he's got to come good again on TV at some point. He's playing so well on the floor that the numbers that he's producing, it's been ridiculous to follow at times, and I think he is going to have that deep run on TV at some point. And he does owe Michael Smith one in the first round, because it was Michael that won that game in the World Match Play. But who's he playing the semi-finals? I'm going to go with Chris Dobey here. He's a winner on the floor this week. He's got a decent record in the World Grand Prix, a semi-final and 2 quarterfinals in 4 appearances. So I'm going to go Chris Dobey to make it through there. He's going to beat Gary Anderson in the semi-finals, and I think he's going to get the better of Martin Schindler as well. I'm going to go 6-3 to Hollywood Chris Dobey against Martin Schindler in the final. He wins his second major, first in front of the Sky cameras, and first where all that prize money is going to go on his ranking.
Well, I also had Dobey on my list, but I did not have him to win the title. I had him to make it all the way to the semifinal, where I have him to go out in what will hopefully be a good match to Gerwyn Price. I think Price has been on the cusp of being back now for some time, but at the same time, he just has not progressed and not found ways to win matches in ranking events as of late. He went out early in the World Match Play. He's gone out first match in 5 consecutive Euro Tour events. He has only had 1 big run in a Players' Championship event this year. But at the same time, he just won a pair of World Series events over the summer. Well, I guess winter, since one of them was in the Southern Hemisphere. And I feel like that shows that when it matters, he's going to bring his best game. And I think getting back to a venue where or an event, I should say, where he's won before and he's made it to 3 finals in the last 4 events is what he needs to get back to playing at his best. I think this is a tournament that suits him. He's one of the best finishers in the world, and having to start with a double, I think, gives him that little bit of an advantage. I think this is where Gessie finally gets back to playing at his best, and I have him there to get through the bottom half of the draw, beating Dobey in the semifinal. As far as the top half goes, I'm not even going to pick who's going to do the semifinal. I'm just going to say who's going to get through it. I picked him in Blackpool. I'm picking him now. I'm picking him in every single tournament until I am right. I am going to go Ross Smith, and I'm going Ross Smith to win this title. Ross Smith is going to win a second major. He is too good. He is too talented. It's weird saying this about a player who in the last 2 years has won 4 events, including a major. But he has won so much less than his talent and his performances and his skill merits. He is a much, much better player than just the one major he has won. He is on the cusp of being a star. So I'm going to keep picking him until I'm right. He's going to win another major. Why not the World Grand Prix? Who cares if he's never been past the second round here? Who cares if he's only topped a 90 average once in 6 matches in the World Grand Prix? It'll eventually come together. He's a better player than he was in 2023. He's a better player than he was in 2022 when he won a major. He's one of the best players in the world. And eventually he's going to prove that to everyone. So why not this week? So I'm going for Ross Smith to beat Geraint Price in the final.
Well, there you have it. Those are our picks for who we think is going to win the World Grand Prix. You've gone with Ross Smith. I've gone with Chris Dobey. You're not going to get any Luke Humphreys and Luke Littler predictions here. We're going a bit rogue there, but we'll be back in a moment to look ahead to the World Masters, which is coming up next week as well. But before we do, let's hear from one of the debutants in the World Masters next week. Here's our chat with Andrew Sinclair. I'm pleased to say we're joined by one of the debutants in the World Masters next week, Andrew Sinclair. Thanks for the time, Andrew. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, mate. Good to chat, and yeah, bizarre. I'm a guest this time rather than a step-in co-host, but same amount of waffle and breeze chatting, I'm sure, from me.
That's why we love having you on, and we've got to start with this debut coming up. You messaged me last Friday. I was out with our good friend Jack, and you said you might be playing in the World Masters. Here we are, just a few days away, and you are on the list of entries. So explain to us how this happened.
Yeah, it was a bit of a weird one, really, because I was going out for the tournament anyway as part of the WDF team, and I was playing in the Open and the World Championship qualifier, and essentially there were some gaps in the member nation invites. Not every country had sent all of their invites in. And, one country graciously stepped forward and said, yeah, you can play. You can have one of our spaces. So here I am. So playing in the World Masters, which is a thing that on ability was never, ever going to happen. But, yeah, I'm going to be there and I'm going to enjoy it and take it as I find.
Yeah, you're living the dream here, having the chance to play in the longest running active major in darts. What's the preparation been like? Because you've not had much time to get ready for it.
No, so the last tournament I played in was the Swedish Masters back in August, where I suffered a heroic 4-0 first round defeat. and to be quite honest, I've not actually played a ton of darts since then. Been very busy with work and various other things going on and that kind of thing, so not had as much time on the board as I would like, but we're just going to go with the flow, see what happens. And the benefit of the new format of the World Masters, I know you've had Nick and Richard on the show before and they've spoken about this, is that it's a round robin now, right? So regardless of whether you've come from New Zealand, Canada, Hungary, or you're me from England, you're going to get 3 or 4 games, right, at a minimum in your group. So you're not going to fly all that way, lose, 4-3, right? And then that's it. So I will at least get a number of games under my belt. We'll presumably be in a group with one of the seeded players, so there's an opportunity to play someone really good as well. So the 4-0 defeat will be a bit quicker. But yeah, preparation hasn't really been a thing. Hoping to do some in the next couple of days, but I'm just going to enjoy it, to be honest. I've got no expectations.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are the goals or any expectations? Is it just going to be play your own game and at some point, I guess, take it as you find?
Yeah, exactly. If I win a leg, that'll be an achievement. Particularly, given the calibre of players that are going to be there, I think winning a leg would be great. But, as long as I feel happy with the way I've played relative to the limited ability I've got, then, I'll be happy.
And you mentioned you'll be going up against one of the seeds. It is a round robin, as you said as well. Is there anyone you'd like to have the experience of playing against next week?
Great question. As defending champion, I think Wesley Plazier would be, a great person to go up against. Same sentiment for, a Neil Duff. But there's a number of, great players. I think I've got to give a mention to someone we both know, Canada's Rory Hansen, who, he's been dying to play in the World Masters, qualified for it last year when he won the Thunder Bay Opens, also won a title this year. I've been chatting to Rory about him coming over, chatting to Ben Robb from New Zealand about him coming over. So, yeah, being in the same group as Rory or Ben would be pretty cool. But, it's going to be a cool group. There's players from dozens of countries coming over, from, Palestine to Australia to Norway, Northern Ireland, everywhere in between. So it's going to be a great multicultural experience anyway. But, yeah, personal preference, I think Ben or Rory would be pretty great, or our friend John Scott as well. That'd be quite fun.
Yeah, that'd be a dream tie for us to follow, and great to see the World Masters back. We didn't have one last year. It's a new host nation this year as well in Hungary for the tournament. 900 plus players have entered, including yourself, for events across the week with the World Open, the Lakeside qualifiers you mentioned as well. How important is this week for the WDF and what they're trying to offer the darting world?
It's enormously important because the World Masters is the longest running major in the world, and from that point of view it's important, but I don't think I'd grasped how vital it was until the World Cup in Denmark last year, when I was part of the general meeting, more just an observer than an active participant. But the one thing that you heard the representatives of all the member nations that were there was saying was, to be honest, for us, for our member countries, the World Masters is more important than Lakeside. Not that Lakeside isn't important, but you think of the number of players that can qualify for Lakeside. This year, with the expansion of the boys and girls, it's 84. But that's based on doing the tour. It's not necessarily based on domestic tournaments or that kind of thing. But for an awful lot of players that start within their national setup, the WDF system, the first goalpost is qualifying for the World Masters, right? So for all the member countries, they were saying, look, for us, having the Masters on the calendar is of paramount importance, because this is the one thing that the WDF can do and no other organisation is able to do in the same way. So I don't think I'd cottoned on to how important it was until I heard that sentiment come from Sweden and Germany and New Zealand and Hungary and all that kind of thing. That Jim Widmeyer, who's now running the US, said something very similar to me as well. So it's hugely important, and I think proving the WDF can do it, running 900 players is incredible. Entries are actually still open for the Open tournament and the World Championship qualifier. Entries are open until next Wednesday for those. But to have that many players, similar number to Assen 2 years ago for the seniors, but the youth is a significant improvement. Those numbers are important. Proving the WDF can do it is very important. And look, in an ideal world, the World Masters keeps moving around. We find other places that can do it. But the Hungarians have been fantastic. They were able to get a government grant to be able to do this, because there's a lot of support in Hungary for sport. And, if this goes well, they may well be able to get further grants in the future to host the Masters again, particularly because those grants are based on youth participation, right? It's the next generation. And I think there are more than 200 boys in the World Masters this time, which is a record and, a phenomenal achievement. So really positive. The Hungarians have been great throughout the whole process. There's some sponsorship stuff that we can be announcing soon, players brief as well about format and all that stuff. But holding it is vital for the member countries, and I think it's vital for the future of the WDF, because this is the tournament that sets the WDF apart, and running it well and running it properly is important for everything that we want to do moving forward.
Definitely. Well, just one more on next week. As we mentioned, 900 plus players. It could be even more by the time the entries close for the other events, but we've picked out a few players that we're looking forward to following next week, me and Burton on the show. But from your perspective, who are you most looking forward to seeing in Budapest next week?
Well, I mean, I've already mentioned two of them, the big rig himself, Ben Robben, and Rory Hansen. But in terms of players I'm really interested to see, I think the men's tournament is an incredibly strong lineup. You know, you've got Plaisir, Jimmy Van Schie, Connor Scott, who've all been on the Pro Tour recently, Alexander Merckx as well. Connor, Jimmy, Wesley playing unbelievable stuff this year. I think the latter stages could be a really fantastic standard. Got some great representatives from Eastern Europe as well. And there's also some players, the member nation invites, that, you know, we don't see a lot of on the tour, but are very, very capable players. So you look at Canada, for example, they're bringing over Jake McMillan, Robbie Mills. There's a number of good players there. You've got Alex Spellman from the US, who is very, very capable, was very close to qualifying for Ali Pali again through the CDC. Some really, really talented players coming from, you know, a range of countries. You've even got some of the guys who won the World Youth Masters in the 90s who haven't played a ton of darts since and have taken advantage of the fact that they get in. So Paul Higgins from Wales and Martin Watmore from England. You know, I don't know what to expect from either of them, but it's cool that the rule we've got in place that allows all former winners in means that they are going to be coming and you know, gracing that stage in Budapest. So ton of players I'm looking forward to. I think on the women's side, really, really interested to see how Robin Byrne gets on, because she just won the Europe Cup women's singles, was fantastic all week in Slovakia, and she's going to Hungary with one goal in mind. She's not playing in the Masters or the World Open. She's just playing in the World Championship qualifier a week tomorrow. And it's because she wants to be the first Irish woman to play on the Lakeside stage. And that's a really great ambition. She was super close to doing it before. I marked her game at the Lakeside qualifier in 2021 when she lost to Rhiannon O'Sullivan. And she was super close then and super frustrated by that defeat. So I'm really intrigued to see how she gets on. She's in fantastic form. Obviously won a women's series as well not that long ago. Kirsi Viinakainen from Finland, been a capable player for a number of years. Her partner Johan Engström will be in the World Masters as well. So those two both worth watching. And also just to mention as well for Natalie Gilbert, who had a fantastic World Masters week last time and was super close to qualifying for Lakeside. She's desperate to play on the Lakeside stage. She's in all three tournaments, and I know her form's been a little bit up and down recently, but if it clicks, it could be an enormous weekend for Natalie. And if she was to get into that Lakeside field, I'd be absolutely delighted for her.
We shall see. Well, it's a big talking point with regards to the WDF in recent weeks has been around transgender players. A lot of talk on social media, players being banned and then not banned from playing. Will we get a statement from the WDF as to what their stance is going forward beyond 2024? Yes,
so the WDF executive team are currently in the process of digesting everything from the AGM, because there were a number of things voted on, not just player eligibility remit that was brought forward by England, but also a number of other things as well, like integration with the DRA and that kind of thing. So there's a number of things that are being discussed, and also trying to understand the viability of implementing certain rules, because, you know, you've got to make sure that just because it's been put forward, is it suitable for implementation as well. So once kind of those conversations are a little bit more progressed and ahead of the new season, communication will be out on the website and be posted on social media as well. But just trying to get all the ducks in a row for the minute. So can't say too much more on that one, because I'll probably get myself into trouble. But when there is communication that we're able to share regarding player eligibility and other things, we'll be in the normal places.
We'll keep an eye on that. Well, yeah, plenty still to come for the rest of this year. The World Masters next week, Lakeside coming up in late November. Then we're going to be turning the page onto 2025. What are the main goals, the main challenges for the WDF next year, in your opinion?
I think, next year is going to feel like the first one properly of being back to normal after COVID. I know we're going to be 5 years in March removed from the start of the pandemic, which is quite a crazy thing to think about. But essentially, there was no WDF darts between March 2020 and the middle of 2021. You then had a truncated season into the 2022 World Championships, logistics, various other things. There then wasn't a World Championship until the end of 23. And to kind of even everything out, we're now on a 2-year ranking system through to Lakeside this year. But from the 1st of November, we're back to a 1-year ranking system. So, in a sense, we're back to where we would have been in 2020, right? When they took over running everything after the demise of the BDO. So, in that sense, I think we're turning the page back to where we want to be. And I think, some of the member countries this year, because it was a 2-year ranking system, they held events last year maybe and said, well, we don't need to necessarily run as many events this year because it might not make as much of an impact to the Lakeside field. But, from November the 1st, we're back to a 1-year system. So the real goal is just to get as many countries running events as possible. I think if you look at the calendar for November onwards, it's fantastic because you've already got, established big tournaments. Second week of November, you've got the Irish Open, which is one of the best weekends on the circuit. I had the pleasure of doing that one a couple of times myself. We'll have the first confirmed Lakeside qualifiers for 2025 from that event. We've also going to have the Czech Open. We've got tournaments in Taiwan and Hong Kong. Youth events in Australia, youth events in Austria, Slovenia have got 2 events on as well, and you've got Lakeside. So it's a really good start, right? Seeing countries like Hong Kong and Taiwan start running events again. And then into next year, it's just trying to build on what we've been doing and get more of our members running more events. Romania already locked in for 2 weekends of events next year. That's a step up on the one they've done in the past, and Vlad and his team in Romania do a phenomenal job. The Faroe Islands have upgraded to a silver for one of their events next year. So the growth is there, right? And there are countries that are doing phenomenal work to drive this forward. And it's just making sure that more of them, right, are part of this moving forward. And I think having the Masters on the calendar, having Lakeside locked in, it gives all of them more confidence that everything is moving in the right direction and we can put stuff on that's going to be part of something really positive. So, Vegas is gold in January as well. Dutch Open coming up in January, which hopefully yourself and I will be at. There's a lot to look forward to next year. And for me, it just feels like we're getting back to normal. And that should mean that we're going to have a super packed calendar with events in as many of our member countries as is possible to do, right? And that's a positive for players, and that's a positive for the WDF system as well.
Good to hear. Well, we'll finish up with a few listener questions that we've had sent in. We've been inundated with questions from our listeners. The first of them comes from William, who says, as you'll more than likely qualify for Lakeside next week, what will be your walk-on song there?
Oh, well, some phenomenal optimism there from Wim, who's currently doing a fantastic job reporting live from the Bruges Open, so shout out to Wim for that. But what would my walk-on song be? This is a conversation you and I have had multiple times before. I think Save a Life by The Fray would be a humorous choice, but I think it's a toss-up really between Agadoo by Black Lace, and I would come out with a giant inflatable pineapple like they used to have on Supermarket Sweep, or Regulate by Nate Dogg and Warren G, because I think that would really get the crowd energised. But I think we're some way off either of those tunes ringing out in any sort of arena of significant size. But, God loves a trier, so...
Keep the faith, it could happen one day. And the next one comes from Longustu, who says, when is the Inside the WDF podcast coming back? It's been 2 years since the last one. He's got a second question here. Will Paul Lim make it to the Lakeside?
2 great questions. So the first one on the podcast, No plan at the moment, but what I will say is that my plan is that in the run-up to Lakeside, a few things have changed for me, so I've got a bit more free time coming up. But my plan is that there are a number of players debuting at Lakeside this year who've all got really fascinating stories, and my plan is to interview those players for the WDF website and kind of do features on their debuts and their stories so people can learn a little bit more about them and use that platform to showcase them. So take, for example, Howard Jones in Australia, who's coming over. This is a guy who's played state darts of Western Australia for a long time, been in and around the periphery of the Australia squad, and earlier this year won a dramatic final in South Australia. He missed match starts, Brandon Weaney missed match starts. He eventually took it out, won 7-6. He's coming over to Lakeside. And he's a real unassuming guy, but he's been toiling away for a long time. And I can tell you, looking at the averages he's posted on Dart Connect this year, I think he could surprise a lot of people. The same goes for Shane McGurk. You know, there haven't been a ton of Irishmen who've played on the Lakeside stage in recent years. John O'Shea, you know, when he won the World Masters, he played at the O2, but there haven't been a lot of Irishmen in recent years. So Shane won the Irish Open last year. Really capable player, had some Pro Tour experience this year. I know he's played on the Modi as well. So he's another one. Jake Taylor from Canada. Some of our international qualifiers, you know, Jan McIntosh, he's not in yet from the Faroe Islands, but he's not far away. He could have a great weekend in Hungary. He'd be phenomenal, right? Because he'd be the first Faroese player to play in any kind of televised competition. So an incredible story. But there's great stories up and down the field, and I really just want to have the opportunity to tell those. So podcasts, not necessarily yet, but the interviews, that kind of depth I was going for before, I'm looking to bring that back. So hopefully that's exciting news for Longosta, maybe yourself, and maybe a handful of others as well. And in terms of Paul Lim, I struggle to see a reality where he's not back at Lakeside, which is just incredible. I know he bashed in a 107 average at the Asia Tour earlier, which is just absolutely bonkers. That he's not far off triple my age, and he's bashing in triple my average as well. So Paul's top of the Asia Pacific race table. He's got a fairly comfortable lead over Yun Matsuda from Japan, and we haven't got many events left. There was one in Iran earlier this week. I'm not sure if that went ahead because of all the issues in the Middle East with them, Israel, Lebanon, etc. Well, you know, Nick Rolls and I have been in contact with Iran for kind of details and, you know, results, all that kind of thing. But obviously with a lot of the top players at the Asia Tour, I'm not sure that's going to have had too much of an impact. And then, if memory serves, there's only one more Asia Pacific tournament left before the end of the ranking period, which is one in Malaysia, and towards the end of the month, which is bronze, right? So unless something's happened in Iran that's affected where Paul's in standings, I think he might well be mathematically locked in after we get those Iran results, or potentially, you know, from Malaysia. But he's pretty much nailed on. It's hard to see two players being able to go above him and be able to come over, right? So I'm pretty sure he's going to come. He actually had the opportunity to play last year, right? So he was quite high up in the rankings, and when we had a player withdraw because they had to play in the PDC World Championship, had to make that decision, Paul was actually offered a space at Lakeside, and he basically said, I didn't think I was in the running, so he'd agreed with his sponsors to do a soft tip thing, and he was like, I now actually can't make it because I'm contractually obligated to do this. So he nearly had it last year, and I think that really redoubled his determination to make sure he got there this year. He won a title in Mongolia, and he's pretty much locked in. And yeah, to be back there 30 plus years after that 9 dart is just going to be an incredible thing to witness. And I think he's going to be the tie everyone wants in the first round, right? Because to be able to say you played Paul Lim on the Lakeside stage is going to be pretty cool. So we're pretty much locked on to have him back, and that's one of the stories I'm super excited about, and what should be a really fun World Championship in just a couple of months' time. It's actually 2 months tomorrow we'll find the 4 new World Champions, which is really, really soon, actually. But yeah, there you go. I think I rambled a bit there, but yeah, Paul Lim should be back.
Happy days. Yeah, we can't wait to see Paul back at the Lakeside. And the last question we've got from our listeners, a friend of mine that you met on our away day recently at Wimbledon, Jake, or Claire as we know him, he says, will you be hosting the Hootenanny again on New Year's?
Ladies and gentlemen, bon hiver. No, you know what? The schedule's not out yet. I've not seen the Christmas special Radio Times, so not quite sure if I've been given the call up yet, but when I know, you guys will know as well. Come on, you dons.
Oh, wow. Well, what a place to finish it. Andrew, it's always a pleasure to get you on the show and have a catch up with you, and congratulations on the invite to the World Masters. We can't wait to follow your games next week. Good luck, and for what else is to come in 2024 as well.
Thank you, Bud. Pleasure as always.
Thanks again to Andrew for joining us. Now looking ahead to the World Masters, a big week of darts. We've also got the World Masters returning next week. Beau Greaves, the clear favourite for the ladies' title, but who do you see as the leading contenders in the men's event?
Well, I tried to get a wide range of players, and despite that, I ended up with no one from the English qualifiers. Sorry, Andrew Sinclair, I don't have you on my list. And I think that in and of itself speaks volumes of how far the WDF and the World Masters has fallen in the eyes of English darts. Now, granted, the event not being in England plays into that as well, and some players who might have gone and played it otherwise aren't, hence why Andrew Sinclair's in the field. But at the same time, if you look at the provisional Lakeside seeds and you see the only English players that are currently seeded are Darren Johnson and I think Matthew Edgar, I think that tells you something about where England, how little this event and the WDF circuit means to most people. I guess I'll say in the UK as a whole. I do have one player from the UK, Northern Irishman Neil Duff, on my list. A former winner. I think he is definitely live, but I have a bunch of players from all over the world. Alex Spellman and Jeff Smith from North America. Jeff Smith, of course, the only North American player to have won a match at the U.S. Darts Masters back in May and June. But I think he's a player who, he's a Lakeside finalist in the past. He's definitely live if he brings his best game. Players, though, from Europe, Brian Rahman, Wesley Placier. I think Wesley Placier is probably the favorite. Jimmy Vanchi, who's made a name for himself in the Modus series as well as of late. I think he's definitely live. Andreas Harrison, he can average 110 one match. The question is, how many dozen points is he going to take off at the next match? But if he can get a little bit of consistency, he probably has the best A game of any player in the field. And that's what we've seen on the Euro Tour against Gary Anderson. But we've seen him play some absolute phenomenal stuff. If he can put it together for a weekend, he'll win it. And then one player from Asia I have on, Lung Kai Fan. Of course, we've seen him in the World Championships before. So those are the names that jump out at me as the players most likely, but there's not a clear-cut favorite other than maybe Wesley Placier, but even he's been a little struggling as of late, a bad week in Wigan in the Players' Championship event, so question of where his game is right now.
Well, I'll start with the player that you just mentioned there, Wesley Placier. I think you've got to mention him. He is the defending champion in the men's event. He did get to back-to-back finals on the Pro Tour earlier this year, and we had him on the show just after that, and he said he would be going to Hungary to try and defend his title that he won almost 2 years ago now on home soil in Assen back in late 2022. And when you're looking at the main contenders for the World Masters men's title, the players that are in this event, I think you've got to be looking at players that have been playing on the Pro Tour this year as top-up players from the Challenge Tour and doing well in that elite field. And I think the odds would suggest going into the World Masters that without any tour card holders in it, but still a strong field, that they're going to be the ones to stop next week. And you said about the English players, not a stronger lineup. I did manage to find one player, though, that I think is going to be one of the contenders. And no, it is not Andrew Sinclair. I'm going to say Connor Scott, he deserves a mention as well. We made a final just a couple of weeks ago in the Players' Championships. He's top of the Challenge Tour as well. I think he's going there with a point to prove maybe, and he also wants to push his ranking up in the WDF. We don't know yet if he's going to be playing the Lakeside or if he ends up qualifying for the PDC World Championship if he goes to Ali Pali. But if it's Lakeside that he ends up going to, I'm sure he wants to avoid playing in the first round and potentially getting into the top 16 so he can be a seed for that. So it's a big week coming up for him. Jimmy Van Ski, another one that you mentioned, and again we've seen a lot of him this year. He's been playing on the Pro Tour recently as well. Andreas Harrison, I had him on my list as well. I think he's going to be a threat there, and I'm sure we'll come on to it more in a moment when we're picking out the players and names that we're looking forward to following next week. But this event, it does attract players from all around the world, and Alex Spellman, one of the top players from North America, making the trip over. Jim Long, Jeff Smith, both making that trip. Ben Robb from New Zealand, he's on the list for the World Masters, a player that I rate very highly. And for me, looking at the players based in Australia and New Zealand right now, I think he is the one next on that list that's going to get that tour card. I think he has got the game. So it's a big field of players in the men's event, but headed up by some real quality. And as we said at the start, Bo Greaves is that clear favourite for the ladies. But with the men's event, I think you could probably write down a list of maybe 5, 6, 7 players and say the winner, it could come from that list of players.
And there'll be 900 plus players in Hungary next week, with the World Open and the Lakeside qualifiers also happening. Which players are you looking forward to following in Budapest?
Well, we just touched on it a moment ago with this week of darts. It does bring in players from all over the world, which is good to see. And I was looking down the list of entries. You've got players coming over from Palestine. You look at the women's event, you've got players from China, India, Mongolia, Uganda as well. So I think from that aspect of it, it'll be interesting to see how they get on and what their levels are like. But just sticking with the women's draw as well, because two names that stick out for me that both had excellent runs in the last World Masters back in 2022. Almudena Fiado from Spain, what a week she had 2 years ago, getting to the final. I think she qualified for the Lakeside that week through the qualifiers as well. But in the World Masters, she knocked out Mikuru Suzuki 5-4 in the last 16, which was a great scalp. But she lost the final to Bo Greaves 6-0. But no shame in that. She was one of many players to be whitewashed in that event by Bo. And in fact, the only player that took a leg off her in that last World Masters, another player I think to keep an eye on, is Japan's Mayumi Uchi. She took Bo all the way to a last leg in that semi-final. It went for all of the first 8 legs went with throw, and Bo broke in the decider and then went on to win the final comfortably. So yeah, they're a couple of players I'm looking forward to seeing how they get on. The youth events, I'll give a mention to a recent guest on the podcast, young Archie Self. I think only 14, but what a talent he is. And he's down to play the Masters, the World Open and the Lakeside qualifiers. He wants to get one of those spots at the WDF Boys World Championship, and I think he's got a brilliant shout of doing that next week. Matthias Mivrang Isaacson, another young player I had the pleasure of meeting recently from Norway, a listener of the show as well. Matthias, he said he listened to our chat with Peter Wright, so I'll be keeping an eye on his results as well. And just lastly, with the men's events, Dean Reynolds, somewhat of a relatively recent blast from the past. I think it was just before we started doing this show, the year before, he won the development tour, won 6 titles, but turned his tour card down in the PDC, and not long after that he took a long break away from the game. But it's good to see him back playing again. And obviously we've got to mention a few popular players with this show: Marcel Wolpen, the Swiss Stompe, Josef Ruxka. He's going to be one of the home favourites. He wears the sunglasses on his forehead's a cult hero on the show. Massimo Dalla Rosa, I think he's only playing the Lakeside qualifiers, but one of the first times we'll have seen him since the PDC World Cup, when he was part of that Italian team that made the quarterfinals. And lastly, we've got to mention him, haven't we? Andrew Sinclair. He's wangled a spot in the field. I hope he can play his own game, take it as he finds, and I think I'm probably more excited than he is to be playing in it. But good luck, fella. I'm looking forward to seeing how he gets on.
Well, you pretty much took everyone I had on my list, other than the American players. I mean, the big thing for this event is to see players from places that we've not seen before, and to see a pair of players. I don't know if they're related; they have the same surname, so they might be. But to see a pair of players in the men's event from Palestine, I don't expect that they're gonna have world-breaking averages. I don't know anything about them, but I'm interested to see how they do. And to get those 4 matches, well, 6 if you include the other events, it'll at least be interesting. I want to see what they have to offer. But there's a lot of players, since this event is in Hungary, from Eastern Europe, and we know there are some good players in Eastern Europe. And we don't know how good they are. We don't know what they have to do. I mean, some of them, we've seen before. There's a pair of Poles that we've seen, actually a trio of Poles that we've seen before plenty of times in the PDC, and Krzysztof Kachuk, Titus Kanek, and Sebastian Steyer. There's a Romanian, Laszlo Kadar, who played in the WDF World Championship a few years ago. And we've seen some of the Hungarian players as recently as just a couple weeks ago in the PDC. It's a relatively long list of names that were at least recognized, but there's a plenty more that we don't recognize. And I'm curious to see how they do. I want to see how all the Americans do, both men's and women's. On the women's side, of course, a lot of them will be just trying to get to the World Championships as well. I don't know. I don't know, other than a couple of these names, who these players are, but if you look at it, it's a huge list of players that have come over. So I'm curious to see how they perform. But beyond that, the other name that I specifically had listed, you also mentioned Mayumi Oichi, coming off that semifinals at the World Masters last time round. Obviously a very, very good player that we've not seen that much of, but the little we've seen has shown that she has a world of talent. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing her perform. But I'll leave it there. Anything else for this week?
Well, we have to say thank you to our guests for joining us, to Cameron and Andrew for their time. Thank you to our sponsors, to Darts Corner, Condor Darts and Quiff for their continued support of the show. Links in the description for all of them. Do go and check them out. And if you fancy a flutter on the darts, if you fancy our weekly Dartscast parlay we've put together, or a bet of your own, Quiff is the place to go. Download the Quiff app or head to the Quiff website. Links in the description, as I said. And remember, there's a chance to supercharge your odds with Quiff. But remember, 18 plus, T's and C's apply. Please gamble responsibly, and begambleaware.org for more information. And lastly, thank you to everyone for listening. We'll be back maybe during the World Grand Prix with a bonus episode. We have got a few interviews in the bank that we could bring you next week, but if not, we'll certainly be back after the tournament to look back at it all and look back at Chris Dobey becoming a 2-time major champion and Andrew Sinclair winning the World Masters on debut. But until then, there's only one thing left to do, and that is to enjoy the darts.
If Andrew Sinclair wins the World Masters,
that's tip of the year, by the way. I'm tipping that now in case it does happen.
I think it's evidence of need to be sectioned of the year, of anything. No, I'm kidding. Of course, Andrew, a friend of the pod, we wish him the best of luck, and hopefully he can prove you right and me wrong, because wouldn't that be something? But we'll be back, as Alex said, maybe with a mid-tournament show. We'll have to figure that out. But I'm not even going to say anything else. It's time to enjoy the darts, because that's all there is to do during the World Grand Prix.